Is it on? Let's make this quick. We don't have much time. We made these recordings via the newly developed tactical observer droid spies. We clones just call them Tods. I'm not sure if us clones will exist anymore. Kamino's far too close. They have to be warned, mobilized if possible. The droids were able to capture some solid footage of our transit from Kamino, scope the incursion in other areas of the Geonosis system. It's choppy at times, mainly because they were made to be stealth observers, not tanks. They were meant for studying the enemy and improving us clones in battle, not surviving billions of unknown salvo consistently fired from all directions.
Prepare for hyperspace.
We're praying that this memoir can help provide some edge, if any, against these creatures. In our last words, it can shed some light to any possible weakness. Prior to this mission launch, there have been reports in the Geonosis system and many other parts of the whole Outer Rim. Reports of various solar flares, earthquakes, tidal waves, and other anomalous occurrences for several years now. Some lush planets in the affected areas turned barren due to these issues. We suppose it to be a result of being so close to wild space in the unknown regions. We were just trained that the Outer Rim had become more dangerous over the past decade. We were commanded to be prepared for anything. In reality, nothing could have prepared us for what we would find on Geonosis. Nothing. If you're listening to this, you found the black box we launched into orbit via the coded distress signal. By this time, we're long gone. All of us. Everything. On this forsaken husk of a planet. We've attempted to take temporary shelter hiding in the catacombs. We are coming out only once more to send out this warning. Hopefully it can spare the rest of the galaxy our fate. But if these things are the cause of the anomalies surrounding our entire Outer Rim, I don't know what hope there is. Maybe traveling to some other galaxy, hopefully faster than they can pursue, hopefully further away than they can reach. Day 1. Upon arriving, we clones started to feel only what could be defined as a deep sense of dread and unease. It was totally against our training, against our developed and hardened genetics, yet it was all pervasive. Surprisingly, the Jedi had it even worse. Really any being that was slightly force sensitive. Most of the Jedi that made up the Strike Force were Padawans and inexperienced knights. They, being less experienced, handled these symptoms the worst. Many were confined to their quarters or the med bays, writhing in pain and anguish, some seeming almost insane, or hallucinating as if something or some things were clawing at their mind and soul. The Jedi Masters thought it might be proof of the worst Sith Lord in history. To them, the situation was now dire. Dire? We had no idea how dire it really was at that moment. There was an overwhelming, dark, screaming presence of what we all assumed to be the dark side of the force surrounding Geonosis. Yoda said it was as if billions upon billions of beings were screaming all at once in complete, calculated chaos. The main sense he and the Masters that came felt was hunger. Ravenous, infinite, mind-gnawing hunger. More so than any Sith that had come before. Unfortunately, at that same time, all long-range comms went dark and ceased to work immediately after leaving hyperspace. We then had to coordinate the invasion via barely functioning short-range comms. Command had planned to jam the comms of the CIS, but it seemed all around the planet there was already a large enough of an interference. We did have to remove some orbital cannons in our sector and some of the CIS fleet surrounding our point of entry. There was only one side of entry to the planet, the galactic northeast. The west seemed to be the primary cluster of the Lucre Hulk fleet. They were to be avoided. We were an extraction force with only 20 acclimators. They did seem preoccupied, and our incursion through orbit went about with relative ease though. The south was covered in interstellar clouds, we presumed to be from wild space, and to be the very things we were briefed about as being potentially extragalactic anomalous dangers. How could we be so right, yet be so terribly, terribly wrong? Once landed, we immediately deployed all ground forces to engage the CIS head-on, while also rescuing the Jedi forces in the arena. The atmosphere was strange though. Thick, humid, changing. It wasn't like your run-of-the-mill desert planet. Something was off. Unknown flora seemed to be growing right before our eyes in different areas. Also, signs of battle scarred the landscape. Already, we were not alone. Thousands of droid corpses littered the expanse of terrain leading up to the arena. When the Jedi arrived at the arena, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme had just been left at their posts, and they were at present releasing themselves. They stated the CIS had left the arena in haste. As we brought the Jedi and Padme to our ranks, cannon and blaster fire filled the air. Not ours, though. We thought that this might be some stroke of luck, or fate of some sort, the Force working in our favor or something. If possible, we could stop the CIS via a pincher strategy, and halt the war before it even truly starts. So, we set off to engage the battle. The LAATs deployed our troops, armored vehicles, and artillery, and we clashed with the CIS flank. Millions of droids and their armored counterparts turned to meet our attack. Meanwhile, countless others seemed to be fighting even harder to keep another strike force at bay. Thousands of unknown pods kept falling from the sky. And after they fell and landed, millions upon millions of living horrors charged towards both us and the CIS. We thought it might be a local species revolting, that we could rally to our cause. They seemed to have only one cause though, to devour everything and anything in their path. Clone, Jedi, Sith, droid, it didn't matter. At first it seemed to be millions of beasts the size of a standard humanoid. But as we and the CIS hit them harder, massive, hulking bioforms emerged from the tides of living blades, teeth, and bioweapons. Every part of these beings was lethal. It was as if some mind or being designed each one with the sole purpose of devouring all existence, and empowered them with such a hellish arsenal that it was actually possible. With each one downed, 100 more took its place, and now we were in a pincher situation. Millions of foes on every side, and these new foreign entities kept arriving on all fronts from the sky. At the forward command center, we overheard that it was a similar situation in space. Dozens of living ships collided with both our acclimators and different portions of the CIS fleet. They would launch their pods and then rise back up from orbit to crash into the nearest starship, Republic or CIS. It didn't matter. And they would either board the ship with the same horrors we faced on the surface or rip the hull to shreds. As if matters couldn't be worse enough, thousands upon thousands of Geonosis and locals started to charge both us and the droid army. Some of these looked very deformed comparatively though. They also seemed to follow unknown six-limbed creatures with bulbous heads into battle as if in some type of trance. What in the hell was going on here? We only came with just over 300,000 strong. We were supposed to be in an extraction force and push the droid army into a potential surrender. We needed more clones, millions upon millions more. Wave after wave of seemingly mindless slaughter was directed by some underlying call. Clones were ripped apart, torn limb from limb, pierced, liquefied, crushed, and any other type of gruesome end you could conceive. Blood was everywhere. Clone blood, Jedi blood, Geonosis blood, and if droids could bleed, they would be pumped all over the ground too, just like the filth that spewed out of every dead bioform we actually managed to take down. Problem was, our casualties were far too high, and the sun was beginning to dip far too low. Soon it would be night. Night 1. We fought droids and bioforms all day. We continued into the night. On Geonosis, there are no lights for when night falls. When their hive would generally sleep, this invading hive buzzed with menace and death. I admit, some of us clones thought we should try to develop some type of truce with the CAS until these invaders were quelled and suppressed. But when everyone is shooting everyone from all sides, and there's not a means of communication really working, making peace isn't that easy. Therefore, on we fought. All the parties in an endless cycle of fire, kill, reload, and repeat. As we continued to press on with the remnants of our army, some of our scouts came back with disturbing reports. Thousands of the living bioforms cleaned up the battlefield. They picked up corpses, limbs, their dead, our dead, anything that could be consumed, and dragged them into massive acidic pools. Even metals or other things not deemed organic, like kyber crystals. Everything went in, and millions more of their kind came back out. It was as if we never had killed them in the first place. One strange entity seemed obsessed with dead Jedi and Sith. It was like a massive floating head with teeth. As it consumed their life force, or whatever it was, it seemed to empower the creature, and what looked like lightning crackled and amassed within it. It seemed to be consuming the force itself out of whatever it could, and the more it gathered in, the more it hungered for more. Was this Darth Nihilus resurrected in some grotesque way? None of the droids could gather any footage of it. It absorbed them all, countless numbers of our forces as well. The bioforms did seem to focus their attacks at key points during the night and divert other efforts to consuming whatever they could, and thereby replenish their whole army once more. The only good news we had that night was that dozens of organic ships seemed to retreat back into the clouds. That being said, most orbiting ships landed to try and replenish what we could of our ground forces. Very few were left. We left some ships a decent distance outside of the clouds to send concussive missiles to any future incoming bioships. There was a pod of Purrgil that came out of hyperspace and peacefully glided into the clouds. Stupid hyperspace whales, such a nuisance most times. They don't realize when they leave hyperspace and hit ships, and they apparently don't realize when they fly right into their own doom. Anyways, at that time, we were directed to focus as much on the planet side front instead of space, and so we did. Yet, we were greatly divided, and split up on so many fronts. It truly seemed to be a losing cause. At this point, many of us were doubting there would be any leaving this planet. Yet, we still fought, hoping that we could end this massacre. Even as a clone trooper, you don't want to die. Even if you were created as a means to better everyone else's existence in the galaxy, even at the expense of your own life. Not like this. Consumed, absorbed, repurposed and resurrected, becoming the fuel consumed to destroy the very republic and galaxy we were meant and made to save. Day 2. When morning came, they had their whole army back, now with millions more due to our sacrifice. And now, their attacks seemed more accurate, more spot on, like they knew our battle patterns internally, not just like it was learned, but like part of us had become part of them. It was eerie and effective. By midday, the planet was declared lost, and the incursion failed. We were commanded to all tactically retreat to the nearest possible safe retrieval points. To retreat to get into safe space, to relay warnings of the unknown race that attacked both us and the CAS, and won. We hoped we could regather our forces and stop any future invasions. Unfortunately, we couldn't find any safe retrieval point. Millions swarmed the whole landscape. A transmission from the acclimators in space then relayed horrifying news. All of the interstellar clouds shifted, surrounding the whole planet. Within these clouds weren't dozens, but thousands of massive organic ships. There would be no escape of the fleet, no rescue. We would be dying here. We will be dying here. In a last attempt, we had all starfighters launch to attempt a jump to hyperspace and somehow relay what we encountered here and send out some warning. There were too many, though. None could make it clear of the clouds. All were lost. Then, all we saw below were now millions of pods falling from the sky. We knew what that meant. Billions of bioforms would be everywhere shortly. We had one last transmission from the acclimators. Some of the bioships seemed to be evolving, as if some type of organic propulsion began to evolve instantaneously. Several of those bioships braced themselves as power gathered in their new appendages in an almost identical way that Purgil do. And then they were gone in an instant. They made the jump to hyperspace. And then all comms failed. Us last survivors, only maybe a few hundred, were driven to try and find hiding in the catacombs at that point. Yet, it seemed these monstrosities had already begun to feast upon the Geonosian living and dead. This new type of hive was consuming the once 100 billion strong hive of the Geonosans. So, we have sought to record this memoir as a warning to the Republic, and really our whole galaxy, of the terror that invaded here. There will be no survivors, except the bioforms. Camino must be warned and not lost. With the amount of life in our galaxy, many undefended systems, they have an almost limitless supply to devour, reproduce, and multiply exponentially. A treaty must be made with the CIS and all systems of the Senate. We will need everyone in the galaxy to have a standing chance. If we are caught up fighting amongst ourselves, nothing will be left to fight over anyways. To them, it doesn't matter. Time is short, and we have to launch this recording now. Their forces are nearby, and will likely find us if we tarry. I guess better to be found and successfully warn the galaxy, not holed up in this self-made tomb of hiding. This is the last of the 501st Legion, signing off. May the Force be with us, or something, or someone, so that all this death isn't in vain.